Welcome to Observations. I am Craig. We have with us Kirk and Scott. Fellas, it was a busy week. I'd like to begin with a article that was written on behalf of CNN regarding Governor Cuomo's willingness to call the bombings in New York, which were pressure cookers filled with all manner of sharp metal objects, designed essentially identically to the pressure cooker bombs that killed 2 people and mutilated nearly 100 more in Boston. The gentleman's article is, his name is Dean Abdallah. He is a former attorney. He's the host of SiriusXM's weekly program, The Dean Abdallah Show. He's a columnist for the Daily Beast, and he is a political blog called Dean's Report. He wrote the following, guys. He said, "Let's not play games or be politically correct. Common sense tells us that the bombings Saturday in New York City and New Jersey were acts of terrorism. But these days, we don't hear the word terrorism used by the media or elected officials until they know that the perpetrators involved have some kind of international links. And we know that this means Muslims. The problem with that approach is that it makes us less safe as a nation," this moron, this piece of human rubbish wrote. Thankfully, on Sunday, the governors of both New York and New Jersey declared that the bombings in their respective states were terrorism, even before they knew the identity of those involved. When I read that, I said, pressure cooker bomb. That has about a 99.999% chance of being perpetrated by a Muslim. The indiscriminate bombing of innocent civilians as an act of terrorism has a 99.999% chance of being a Muslim. Now, there are terrorist acts on rare occasions that are perpetrated by non-Muslims. About 1% of the world's terrorist acts are perpetrated by non-Muslims. With those 2 conditions, pressure cooker bomb, totally indiscriminate in terms of completely uninvolved in innocent civilians, then you get to 99.999% Muslim. And I read this and said, this piece of crap that wrote this is going to find out tomorrow that the perpetrator was a Muslim. The New York and New Jersey bombings, the piece of human worm rot that perpetrated them was a fundamentalist Muslim, came from Afghanistan. Do you think that Mr. Abdallah wrote a letter of apology and said, I ought to quit my job. I'm a piece of garbage. By listening to me, you are less safe? When it turned out to be another Muslim, and it's 99.9. He even wrote, he says, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary that only Muslims commit acts of terrorism. Now,
percentage-wise.
No one ever said that only Muslims commit acts of terrorism. And this guy was an attorney, so he knows how to use the English language. It's just that 99% of all terrorist acts are committed by Muslims. That doesn't mean they have an absolute exclusive. Just 99%. Then he names some acts that he says, by non-Muslims. There are many and far between. Now, of course, every act of terrorism that's taken place in America recently has been perpetrated by Muslims. But he talks about probably
Oklahoma City. He probably throws that out there.
Yeah, and of course, Oklahoma City, the McVeigh was trained by Abu Sayyaf and in the Philippines, and the gentleman who provided the technology, the way to make that fuel bomb, is now in custody of the U.S. government because he was convicted of the first bombing of the World Trade Center, the one with the car parked in the garage. So even it has Islamic underpinnings. But, just say that beyond the fact that the technology was provided courtesy of Muslims. It's the same bomb that was then deployed in the World Trade Center the first time. But that's one act. Name another. When the kid went ballistic with his knife and his gun in Santa Barbara and Isla Vista, that wasn't an act of terrorism. The kid was on and off psychiatric drugs, and he was literally out of his mind. He wasn't trying to change society. He was crazy. Crazy people do crazy things. The same thing, Sandy Hook. Sandy Hook wasn't an act of terrorism. The kid just was out of his mind.
Yeah, the only things that I can think of aren't on American soil. You could probably include some of the IRA stuff in there.
But the IRA thing is so misapplied because the IRA very seldom attacks civilians.
Well,
the targets of the IRA was a British government, and the British government deserved. I don't want to say that people deserve to die that are employees or troops of the government, but the British government's oppressive tactics in Ireland for over 1,000 years caused the Brits to be complicit in the animosity that was engendered against them. Now, that doesn't justify using violence as the solution, but it was not terrorism because the targets were seldom if ever civilians.
They didn't go bomb themselves to prove they were doing the righteous thing.
No, they attacked government institutions.
Yeah.
They didn't go after innocent civilians. Islam is almost universally innocent civilians.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the Boston bombing. Occasionally they'll attack, like the Fort Hood situation. That wasn't actually an act of terrorism.
He was at war at that point.
It's a Islamic attack, and the people that were being killed were unarmed, but it wasn't an act of terrorism because the targets were soldiers.
Which is the same in Afghanistan when they attack bases or things like that as well.
Correct. Yeah. You got to be careful when you use terms, and this fellow doesn't seem to get that. And it's a person who's insane, who just kills because they are insane, isn't committing an act of terrorism.
Yeah.
But that really was quite upsetting. And of course, you have the father saying, I told the FBI that my son was reading, bad materials, and of course the FBI says, no, he never talked to us. It's just not true. And then Scott, in your fair city, St. Cloud, Minnesota.
It's not my city; it's further north, but about 90 minutes away.
Okay. It's
90 minutes north of me.
Okay, 90 minutes north of Minnesota, St. Cloud, Minnesota.
St. Cloud, Minnesota. Yep.
Mm-hmm. And there, the New York bombing was a Afghani Muslim. You have a little Somalia there, so it was a Somalian Muslim, wasn't it?
Little Mogadishu.
Yeah.
I don't know if the guy was from down here or if he was from up there, but yeah, I know what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, he was a Somalian Muslim fundamentalist. By the way,
we have them. The problem is that we have them all over the state now. We have them everywhere, and we've been told ever so eloquently that if we don't like it, we can get out.
Yeah, that's what the governor of the state of Minnesota said. Now, it's interesting in both cases. The media says that, and the judicial representatives are saying, we're still searching for what their motive might have been, and whether they have connections to any outside organization. They both left letters. They both said, we're doing this on behalf of Islam. We're fundamentalist Muslims.
Well, the guy up here was walking around and he was asking certain questions.
Right, are you a Muslim?
Yeah, and if you said no, he attacked you. Yeah,
that is correct.
Now, for the new audience, describe to them what's the difference between a fundamentalist and a radicalized jihadist.
Yeah, radical is an interesting term. If you look at the dictionary definition of radical, what you will find is it is defined as a fundamentalist. Radicals, the dictionary definition of radical, and there's a lot of dictionaries, both old and new, but a traditional dictionary will define radical as a fundamentalist from the root. However, that is never how it's used. Language is morph and evolve with time. For example, if you were to ask any one of the politicians or people in the judiciary, they would say, we want to know when he was radicalized. And you'd say, are you using the term radical to describe someone who is at the extremity and therefore at the as far away from being a fundamentalist as possible? Or are you using radical as someone who is a fundamentalist, who is representing the religion as it was originally presented and lived? And you will find that 100% of those who use the term radical Islam or radicalized are using that term to speak of someone who's at the far extremity, the far extreme, the exception as opposed to the rule. Yeah. So that's one of those cases where you really have to be careful with the term. Yeah, you can look it up. I've had people write me a letter and says, what you're saying about radical is untrue. A radical is a fundamentalist. I said, that's the way the word's used.
Yeah. But in the context, when I teach, I teach fundamentals of drawing and painting skills.
Right.
If I were to call those radical, people would look at me like, "Oh, what are you doing?"
Right. Yes. That's why the term is never used. When people think of radical now, they think of like a vine with an offshoot, and that offshoot is just going way away from the rest of the vine that has been trained against a trellis or something. It's the radical offshoot is how the term is perceived, and so they're looking for how they were radicalized.
But you can't radicalize somebody who's...
Read the damn Quran.
It all comes down to
the Quran and doing what they're doing.
Muhammad was a terrorist. He was a sexual pervert. There was an article today. Now we get a little bit for these two murders. The article came out actually yesterday. And it was from, I think it was the CDC. And with the Centers for Disease Control. And what they came out and said is that the number of women, girls, in the United States of America that are now either have been or will be sexually mutilated, female genital mutilation, is 500,000.
In the United States?
In the United States, 500,000 little girls are going to have their genitals mutilated by their own mothers. And this article from the CDC, which is so politically correct, they wouldn't tell you the truth if it killed them. They said that the reason for this is increased immigration from countries where the practice is common. And then said that there are religious, societal, and one other reason for female genital mutilation. And not one said, about 99.9% of female genital mutilation is perpetrated by fundamentalist Muslims.
I bet you that all your big countries where it's popular, and I bet they all have something in common too.
Hey, look, you've heard of a company called Country. It's actually Mitzrah is the name of the country today. If you ask a person who lives there, they would say they live in Mitzrah. And you've probably heard of the term Mitzrayim, which is the plural of Mitzrah, which is the Torah's term for this place. The country is, we know it by its Greek name, Egypt. What percentage of Egypt's population is Muslim and what percentage is Coptic Christian? Do you guys know?
It's got to be 90% Muslim by now, if not more.
Yeah, it's 90.
Really small, maybe 5%.
No, the last survey was 90-10. 10% of Egypt is Coptic Christian, 90% is Muslim. The records are very well known in Egypt. Is the reason I mentioned the country. Do you know what percentage of Muslim women have their genitals mutilated by their mothers when they're preteens?
Oh, I'm going to guess high 90s.
Well, it can't be high 90s because 10% of Egyptians aren't Muslims.
Okay. Well, then 80, 90%? Yeah,
90% of Egyptians are Muslims. The percentage of Egyptians whose women whose genitals have been mutilated as a child is 90%. Well, it's 100% of Muslims.
Who thinks like that?
I mean, can you imagine having a daughter and saying, you are such a piece of rubbish that I'm going to make certain that you will, not only are we going to do something that is incredibly disfiguring, incredibly painful, but it will deprive you of ever being able to enjoy sex. And I'm going to do this to protect my own honor, because if you were to have sex outside of us selling you to some pervert, we'd have to kill you. So I'm doing this because to keep myself from being shamed.
Think about that, though. Even, I mean, we're all heterosexual men. Could you imagine having a partner that wasn't enjoying it?
I'd rather not do it.
Yeah.
I'd rather not do it.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's half the enjoyment or 2/3 of the enjoyment. But having a partner that doesn't enjoy it, I'd far rather not do it.
I think it's got to be more than that. It's got to be the 2/3. It's got to be the 2/3 because otherwise I can go do, if it's just my enjoyment, I can go do that myself.
Yeah.
So why would you do that? What animal does that? What kind of animal does that?
A religious one.
Yeah.
A Muslim. That's the reason why, there was a public service commercial that was aired throughout Germany over the last week. And it was all designed to show tolerance for Muslim women wearing the hijab, which is the outward sign of you're owned and controlled, and if you do anything that expresses any individualism, you will have your parents or your husband kill you. And they said, that we should make the hijab where it's feel more comfortable. And so the public service announcement, the commercial, encouraged non-Muslim women to start wearing the hijab. As opposed to saying the hijab is sexist, it's demeaning, it is against Western values. They want non-Muslim women to wear it. Are we out of our ever-loving mind?
Where is the women's rights
score? Yeah, with the 500,000 Americans now. 500,000 American girls having their genitals mutilated by their parents. Where are the women's rights organizations?
Oh, where's the child protection agencies?
Yeah. The next issue in the news was that police brutality. It's not being perceived as just police brutality, but Kirk Scott, how long have we been talking about the militarization of the American police and the fact that the gun is being used as their first option and they're way too murderous, and that this is going to cause unmitigated challenges for America?
I'd be willing to bet we've talked about it from day one. Yeah. Pretty close to day one. It's one of the first things that me and you talked about. Yeah,
I'll bet that I go back on this 10 years and became more and more conversant about it when following George W. Bush's Patriot Act, where the national spy apparatus, the NSA and CIA, became wholly militarized and completely integrated with the Department of Justice. And it became obvious with the WikiLeaks and the Snowden releases that the NSA, CIA, FBI, and Justice Department were conspiring against Americans. And then there was the release that there were many thousands of convicted felons who were convicted on what the FBI knew and the Department of Justice knew at the time was bogus information. All that fiber and hair analysis that put so many people away is all phony. There's no science behind it at all. It was completely and totally a fraud, and they knew it. And And it became obvious that we had a serious problem with that integration. And then with the Patriot Act, with all of the federal agencies, including the FBI and the ATF and so many more, being now integrated with the local police. And then the local police and the National Guard being deployed in civilian centers with weapons of war. And then the attitude of police becoming so belligerent that when a cop comes up to you, you just want to say, leave me alone. I've done nothing. You have no right to detain me. You have no right to come up to me and act like God. I have no respect for you. And it's, you know, they're demanding, if you don't follow their demands, but hell, they'll shoot you today. And I used example after example after example of where they had done this. And we've been doing this now for a decade. Well, 2 more murders by police. One man was holding a book. His wife released her cell phone video of it. The police will not release, and the government will not release the official police video of it, which tells you it's gruesome. But the woman, the wife of this man, is yelling at the police that don't shoot him. Don't shoot him. He's had a traumatic head injury. He's going to be slow. Don't shoot him. They shot him. And the first thing that she says is, you better not have effing killed him. Of course they did. And then you have the guy whose car stalled, who was, based upon his behavior, was likely drugged. Some report says that there was PCP in the car. Another report says there was PCP in the person. The toxicology reports are not out. Whatever the case may be. But and you know, using PCP and driving a car, if in fact that's true, we don't have the toxicology reports. That's bad. And clearly this person was doing what I would do, which is to walk away from the cops. I want nothing to do with them. They've never done anything for me. I don't want them around me. I don't want them curtailing my freedom. But he walked away from the cops with his hand out. And the woman shot him, killed him. Now, she has been indicted. But until we start indicting all of them, like the killers of Tamir Rice, and putting them all in jail. Now I heard the other day, well, look at this is tragic. Look at Virginia. Virginia is losing many thousands of police officers because they don't want to be scrutinized in this way. Good. It's like if we could lose the entire military, we'd be safer. Freer.
Yeah.
But then you get the Trump's response to all this, which is stop and frisk.
That's horrible.
That's essentially martial law.
Yeah.
Stop and frisk. No. The Constitution says you cannot do that. And it's unconstitutional. So you're willing to throw away the Constitution and do it, which is essentially impose martial law to be safe. Anyone who sacrifices freedoms for security ends up with neither.
It's called Pax Romanus.
Yes, correct. It's been the case for a long time. And the response to all of this by the government is to try to hire more police, to bring in the National Guard, to put in curfews and more military equipment. Right. So when I saw this last one, guys, my response was that America is about ready to elect its last president.
Yeah.
Whether it's the man who has a complete disconnect between his brain and his mouth and says things that, I mean, almost everything he says I'm just disgusted by. Or it's one of the most despicable, self-serving, dishonorable people who's ever been in American politics. The rotten one. I think they will be the last elected American president.
Yeah.
I think we'll end up with the dictator.
I thought, well, initially maybe that something will happen. They'll slow this down a little bit, but because we're kind of in that slide to the World War III, the war, I think it's going to escalate even worse than we thought, quicker than I thought. So. Yeah.
Hey, but I want to ask you, was there there's protests in the street now, and people taking a knee for the national anthem, which I wouldn't take a knee. I don't take a knee. I don't take a knee. Yeah, I don't take a knee for anybody or anything under any circumstances. And of course, they're doing it because of racial injustice, and the only racial injustice in America, folks. And this to just be clear, that if a African American is murdered, 90% of the time the perpetrator is African American. If you want to deal with social and racial injustice, and you're concerned that Black Lives Matter, then your anger ought to be not at police, but at your brethren. 90% of the time, according to the Department of Justice, if a black man is murdered or a black woman is murdered, they're killed by another black person. And if you want to deal with the racism implications, if a black and white are involved in a homicide, 80% of the time the perpetrator is black and the victim is white. Those are the facts. Now, I will say, and this is the only part of the Black Lives Matter and the taking the knee that they've got right. But they don't understand the root cause. It is true that blacks are more likely to be shot by police and killed by them than are whites. I think the numbers, like for example this year, that police have shot and killed, just on the ones that have been reported, most aren't reported, about 900 individuals, and about half of them have been black, which, you know, blacks represent, 13% of the population, so that's 4 times the rate of the population. But what they don't bother to consider is, well, do blacks commit per capita 4 times more violent crimes? And the answer is yes. A black person is 4 times more likely to commit a violent crime. So then the numbers are equivalent. There's no racial profiling at all. And then you would say, okay, and when it comes to drug offenses and murder, which is the 2 things that they're dealing with the most,
yeah,
what percentage of those are perpetrated by blacks versus white per capita? And once again, you find that the police shootings are in line with reality. And, you know, so I used to tell Muslims all the time back in the day that I would write them back and forth, but they said, you know, we don't like to be, profiled on and accused of, all Muslims are terrorists. Because I would say all good Muslims are terrorists. There are a lot of people pretending to be a Muslim. The people that have no clue who Muhammad was, they have no clue what the Quran says. They're clueless. They're Muslim in name only. They know nothing of their religion. Yeah. It is possible to be a really bad Muslim and not be a terrorist. But if you're a good Muslim, if you're just a Muslim by the Quran's definition, you are a terrorist. And they'll, they say, we don't want to be profiled that way. I said, well, then stop committing 99% of the world's terrorist acts.
Mm-hmm. Or leave your religion.
Yeah. Well, one of the 2, but don't complain that people are looking at you like they think you are likely to commit a terrorist act, or look down at you when you're stupid enough to wear the hijab, because,
facts always drive you to the corner, and put you in a corner. You're either going to respond to it correctly or you're not. I mean, it's not somebody picking on you.
We're all here for that reason. We're all here.
It is.
We're all here for that reason. Yeah. We do this program. We write these books. We convey this message because we were willing to go where the words led.
Yeah.
The facts led us to these conclusions, and regardless of what we had previously believed, regardless of our prior affinities, I was a very patriotic, right-wing, conservative, Republican, evangelical Christian who was an ordained minister in the Presbyterian Church. I gave up all of that because the facts undermine the credibility of those things. Mm-hmm. I just went where the words lead. Are you willing to do so? And if you're holding on to this myth that we all worship the same God, it isn't. We have to be accepting. The terrorists are not good Muslims. They are the extreme. They have been radicalized. They are not representing their religion, because when the St. Cloud incident occurred, mm-hmm. I read about 10 articles, the first 10 articles that I found. All 10 were written for a singular purpose: to disassociate Islam from the crime when it was the only relevant factor in the crime. So last week we considered this statement. It's Yahowah 121. It reads, how is a city filled with enduring truth, aman, that which is established and trustworthy, verifiable and reliable, confirming and building confidence in the relationship, unfailing throughout the duration of time, always nurturing and dependable, a pillar upholding and supporting the right doorway. How has the city filled with enduring truth become like a whore? The honest, fair, accurate, upright, and vindicating path to righteousness, Sadak, and the righteous means to justly resolve disputes that Misbat had once dwelled in her, even through the darkest hours. But now, they are murderers.
Right. That's an indictment.
Something profoundly changed in Jerusalem. Jerusalem is where Yahowah introduced the covenant, where he confirmed the covenant with Moshe and Yishak. It is where he fulfilled his promises with the Doge David and had his home built right up the hill from Dode's. It is where Yosha fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bakorim, creating the Mizbach, the means to justly resolve disputes. Passover, unyeasted bread, firstborn children, and Shavuot, the promise of 7. All those things took place there. And what happened immediately thereafter? Well, the Romans came in, and in 70 A.D., they not only tore down the temple, they murdered a whole bunch of Jews, and they looted the wealth of the temple and used it to fund the most despicable arena in human history. And the slaves they hauled out of Jerusalem built it. Yeah, it was chosen people. Now, you can't be more murderous and despicable than Rome and using the temple of Yahowah to build your Colosseum, where the worst of man was on display.
And it is. There's nothing that Nazi did that can be more horrifying to me than when you read about that. I mean, you're sitting there eating your hot dogs and popcorn and you're drinking your beer watching this horror.
Horror. Whether it's animals tearing people apart because you've abused them, or gladiators fighting to the death, killing people, or the celebration of pagan gods. Everything that was Rome was despicable.
Yep. Definitely, and we've even gone a step farther and we glorified it.
Of course. Yeah. What do we name our capital? In fact, it's on the Capitol Hill, right? Palpatine Hill was where the Roman government was, and the official body, the elected body of that government, wasn't it the Senate of Rome? We have a Senate too, don't we? What was the symbol of Rome? Wasn't it not the eagle?
Eagle.
Oh, what was the symbol? What's the symbol of the United States?
Eagle, of course.
The bomb, right?
Of course. All right. What kind of architecture do we have in our capital?
Mm-hmm. The big dome.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're the modern incarnation of Rome. And then, of course, that wasn't enough. Hadrian then tells the Jews who are in diaspora after 70 A.D., and in 133, he tells them, hey, come, I've got this great plan. We'll go and we'll rebuild the temple, and we're going to rebuild this capital. Rome that was brought in the 3 legions to disperse you. We'll make it all right. Come back home.
Now that's a precursor of what's about to happen.
Yeah, and exactly. And the Jews, not knowing their God, came back to Jerusalem. Yeah, and as soon as they came back, there's a couple of details that I omitted, my little ruse. We're going to build this as the city as a spa for Roman legions. We're going to rename the city after myself, no longer be Jerusalem. And the temple we're going to build on top is going to be a shrine to me, right next to one to Jupiter. So Jupiter will have his, and then right next to it we'll have a shrine to me. I like them apples. At which Rabbi Akiba decided that he would elevate a warlord, Bar Kokhba, called him the Messiah, and killed any Jew that wasn't willing to back up that claim. Went to war against Rome, and Rome brought in its legions and annihilated the Jewish people, renamed the land, salted the earth, raised the city.
They may be God's children by birthright, but when you abandon God's Torah, He ain't gonna be there to protect you.
That's exactly what
He said, "This is the deal. You lose my protection."
Yeah, that's correct, and they did. He said, "I raised you as my children, and then you rejected me, and then you replaced that relationship with a despicable religion." And so that is what happened to Jerusalem. And if you look at it now, it was then thereafter taken over by Rome. What little was left, the Byzantines. Then when Constantine's mother, Constantine never converted to Christianity, but his mommy did. She went to Jerusalem and built shrines over all of the various sites. And then you look at that regime, and it'd be hard to find a more murderous regime than Roman Catholicism, particularly during the time of Constantine, Theodosius, and really for better part of 1,500 years thereafter.
They had the world's biggest army right there at their disposal.
Yeah, and then following them, you have the Muslims, and within 100 years of Muhammad's death, Muslims conquered the area, and they defaced the Temple Mount by putting a shrine to Satan, the dome of the Hufi print, and then the mosque there, because of course Muhammad claimed that he had been there after riding the wild ass through the night. Of course, the little girl that he was molesting in his bed said, "No, he never left the bed. I don't know. I was the victim of pedophilia. He was abusing me at the time." But she was about 9 years old at the time. Beyond the fact that she attests the fact that he never left his bed that night, abusing her, and she was 9 years old and he was 53 at the time, you are still dealing with the fact that asses don't fly. And the temple did not exist in Jerusalem. It hadn't existed from 70 CE, and Muhammad was too stupid. He didn't recognize that fact, and Muslims are so stupid that when the Quran speaks of these things, they aren't smart enough to say, "Well, that was a lie. Why would I believe a book that lies to me like that?"
When you're confronted, Yahowah talks so plainly. You write a lot more clearly than I do when I translate, but as far as what words mean and all, we're totally in sync on what we're doing.
Yeah.
Yet, when he speaks, when Yahowah is talking so plainly, why, and you confront somebody with it, because this has been almost to the point of depressing me when I talk to you. Personally, I mean, I love this show and what I get to participate in these two shows. But when I'm talking with somebody on a personal level, and they just go totally brain dead when confronted with these facts.
Yeah,
and when
it's hard, isn't it?
I just get where I don't want to tell anybody. I mean, I just go, why am I doing this? So they look at me with their eyes rolling, or they just don't want to have anything to do with me.
Well, look at Yosha. He had his one large public address.
Yeah.
I mean, he's lived for 33 years. It's only one large public address. Interesting, by the way, that it's only covered in the book written by the eyewitness Matanya. And it's 3 chapters of Matanya, 5, 6, and 7. Only one, though. Everything else was he was walking along and he was responding to somebody, or he's talking with his disciples. Only one.
Yeah.
And almost every time that he's confronted by somebody making some question or statement, he'll put them down, really. Yeah. And his first response is, "Why would you ask me that? What does it say? I mean, you've read the book. What does it say in the Torah?" And then when they just look at him stupid, he says, "It says this. That's what it means." And I spoke clearly enough. And then after all of that, he just walks away from them, disappears, because his experience, Kirk, is the same as yours, the same as mine. He didn't want to talk to him. He said it was a waste of time. He says,
what is so hard to grasp?
He makes one large public address which says, do not think I'm here to found a new religion. Do not think that I'm here to do away with the Torah. Do not think that I'm here to replace it, to annul it. And I'm here to tell you that the wolf in sheep's clothing, whose name is going to be lowly and little, is going to claim that and create a religion based upon all these things. And then you're going to claim that you know me based on that religion. I would say, I don't know you. Get away from me, all of you who are Torahless. That's his only one public address. Everything else, he said quietly to a small group and then walked away. You've got to think, what is the reason for that? Because he only came to do one thing. To fulfill Pesach, Matzah, Bokodim, and Shavuot. That's all he came for.
Yeah.
He did those things. Yeah, did those things. I was prepared to do them in year 4000, 33 CE. Did them, and that was what he was here for.
I know it sounds, I'm just still frustrated by the whole thing. I kept ups and downs like everybody else. I know it, but I'm just kind of sharing them out loud. But the verse you just read, 21, you've got a word in there, Aman, and Aman also means not subject to change or revision, and it's talking about the source from which restoration, salvation flows. Jerusalem, the city can only be that city. There's no other city.
Right.
Kuryah.
Well, Kuryah. What are the last?
These are not hard words to figure out, and anybody could read these things, and you'd say, well, wait a minute. This is an ongoing. We've talked about Olam a lot. Olam says for always. My whatever, my mitzvah, my plan. My covenant relationship,
Yeah, well, think about this for a moment. You just mentioned Kuryah. That was the word. That's my way. It's not the common word for city in Hebrew. The common word for city in Hebrew is
Yeah.
Okay? Y-R. This is Kuryah.
Yeah.
It is based on Kara, Q-A-R-A-H. So Q-R-H. And the H at the end of the word, all that does is make the word
feminine. Yeah.
Correct. So the basis of this word is the QR. QR is a place to meet, a place to reveal one's presence, a place to encounter one another.
Right.
It's QR, and then the last two letters, YH. It's a place to meet Yah. It's a place for Yah to reveal himself. It's a place to encounter Yah. That's the name of this particular city.
And look at the letters. You've got a new day. You've got a man facing Yah.
All right.
Yah with his hand hanging down, holding down, reaching down, open-handed to lift up someone, finishing with a feminine Hannah, looking up, beholding. I mean, you can't get anything else out of it. And
Actually, no, you're wrong.
No? Okay.
No, you're wrong. You're wrong. And this is your area of expertise, so I'm going to challenge you on this one.
Okay.
Which way does the Rosh face?
Rosh is facing to Yah.
No. Isn't the Rosh facing? I thought the Rosh faces the left.
Well, it's facing to the left, but the Y is after that.
No. Let's see. What is that? You're right. So that so I'm wrong. So it's the R is so I'm looking here in English. Yeah, the R is facing to the left, but the Yah follows the R. So the R is in fact facing Yah. That is correct. He's facing Yah. No, you're right. You're actually right.
The meeting Yah in the context of what Yah is meeting us for. To lift
right.
It up.
Right.
Pretty.
Yeah. In fact, if you look at Torah, for example, the Rosh is facing the Hey, which is the one letter that's duplicated in Yahweh's name. So, again, anytime the Rosh faces a letter in Yahowah's name, its implication, the implications are, as a rule, that it's positive. So this is the place to encounter Yah. But now they are murderers. And if you look at Jerusalem now, particularly with this higher percentage of Muslims as there are in that city, and they're the most murderous people per capita in human history. It's a bad scene. And of course, what's going to happen there over the next 15 years is going to be horrific. Now, the next statement here takes some work to really understand. But his following statements suggest that the reason that the city of Jerusalem has gone from the place of vindication to the place of murderers is what is said here next. Your money and that which you yearn for, kasef, your metal coinage and that for which you long, have become impure and worthless dross of no value, becoming refuse by backing away from that which is valuable. It's from the verb chug, which is to be repulsed, to hedge, and to turn away. And this is the part, that part's pretty straightforward. Although most people don't understand that kefish means more than just money. It's what you yearn for. It's whatever your priorities are. So your money and that which you yearn for have become impure and worthless dross. Boy, if you talk about the coinage now in America, where America's currency is a debt instrument, a promissory note that's based entirely on debt. And how you couldn't have in a currency money less pure than the American currency. Yeah, the fiat currency of America has got to be the least pure, most worthless dross of any currency in human existence. And of course, at this time, the Romans in particular, who had exclusive rights to the coinage. The coinage was really, and banking was really on trade, was all under the prowess of the Carthaginians, who were Phoenicians actually, but the Carthaginians. But when Rome double-crossed the Carthaginians and then pummeled them, Rome had an exclusive on the coinage, and Rome during this period started to debase their coinage. They started to shave size, weight, and they went from 99% pure silver to about 80% silver. So the Romans were the first to inflate their currency by devaluing it. And of course, man has made a habit of that ever since. It was part of the public works projects of some of the real stalwarts of morality and Rome, guys like Nero, and in particular, he was really big at it. But so was who was the sexual pervert?
Caligula.
Caligula was in that period as well. Then it says your alcoholic drinks, and you might say, why would he talk about alcoholic drinks? And we'll talk about that in a moment. I'll get your opinion, and then your alcoholic drinks are diluted in the sea. Well, the sea is Baha Mayim, which can also mean waters or with urine. Mm-hmm. Now, why was alcohol important?
Well, to purify things.
Right. So if you're drinking in a city like Jerusalem, if you're drinking water that isn't brewed or distilled, and they had very little distilling at the time, so it was almost everything was brewed. It was either wine fermented or brewed distilled. Not distilled. When you're brewing, Bill, not distilling, but brewing with yeast. If you don't do that, the water will kill you.
Yeah.
Okay. So you have to drink alcoholic beverages. Now today we know that if we boil water, we can disinfect it, but they had no clue about that then. No clue. So no one boiled water to remove the pathogens. And so the only way to survive drinking anything in a city was to have it be alcoholic. Now, if you have an alcoholic beverage and it's diluted with water, mm-hmm. It's going to kill you.
Yeah.
It's going to kill you.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's part of it. So your alcoholic beverages, that what you're brewing this to eliminate the pathogens, but then you're diluting what you're doing, and you're putting the polluted stuff right back into it. So yes, right back into the system. So he is explaining from a scientific and medical point of view what they're doing to themselves. And of course, alcoholic beverages, that which is intoxicating, which impairs judgment.
Your decision making, sure.
Right. So
drink and drive.
Right. Exactly. And so that's what it's representative of. It's you're affecting your ability to think.
Yeah.
And then also ma'am is the Hebrew word for pee, urine.
Yeah.
It's like you're peeing into your own cup. So there's a lot of subtleties that are being communicated here. I think that the vast preponderance of politicians are in politics. Hillary Clinton is and Bill Clinton were the epitome of this. I don't think anyone's ever worse, although George Bush that preceded him was almost as bad. And Obama is clearly as bad. I mean, George Bush was bankrupt multiple times prior to becoming president. The Clintons were bankrupt before becoming president, and Obama had never had a job in his life. And they'll all leave the Oval Office with tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. So if you think that they did things for any other reason than their own self-enrichment, think again. God's not impressed. By the way, if God's saying, by the way, your money, and that which you desire is dross, it's impure, it's worthless. How does somebody get this notion that God wants you to give him money?
Yeah. Good talk. Great talk.
That's like saying, God saying,
that's so crappy. I won't.
That bull patties out there in the field are really stink to high heaven, and they're really yucky. What I think you ought to do after I tell you that they're really crappy and yucky is, why don't you share them? Why don't you bring them to me? Yeah, that's what I don't have. Is I don't have enough bull pies up here in heaven. All right, then it gets into your political and religious figures. Your political and religious officials. This is Sar Ath. And Sar is Ath would be your leaders and high-ranking officers, your government rulers and wardens. That word is kind of funny. Your nobility and overseers, your most influential merchants, and your contentious and adversarial lords. Wow.
That's another word that's written really cool.
Yeah, I know. I love that. Yeah, isn't that written really cool?
And
absolutely.
When you do Sar, with the double faces,
right?
Then you get a double dose of it, just like when you repeat words. So.
Yeah, all right. In fact, well, the next word, we have Sar, which is the sin, Rosh, and then we have the next word is Karar, which is written with the C and then the R and the R, but the C and the S are very similar in their sound. So he explains what he thinks of religious and political figures by the juxtaposition of Sar and Karar. So it's your leaders, your high-ranking officials, your government rulers and wardens, your nobility and overseers, your most influential merchants, and your contentious and adversarial lords, your political and religious officials, are defiant and obstinate in their rebellion. They're stubborn in their defiance.
Thieves.
Yeah, thieves. That's why I spent all that time with Jerry Falwell, who in person just was really a lovely guy. He just treated people so outwardly wonderfully. And after I then met with Al-Qaeda and I came back and wrote Tea with Terrorists and was beginning my study of the Torah, because the Quran claims that it confirms the Torah, and what I was finding, it was the antithesis of it. And then I was beginning to find out how poor our English translations are, and I had that meeting with Jerry Falwell and said, man, everything that you're preaching, your Christmas, your Easter, your Sunday worship, your God dying, your Trinity, all that every bit of it, your Jesus, your Christ, your unnamed God, all of it is just completely bogus. Your unwillingness to observe peace like Matzah B'Kodam Shavua. And after 6 hours worth of meetings, I get, yeah, everything you said is true.
Yeah,
But
you're right.
Yeah, you're right. But, if we were to say it, we'd be broke. The people coming into our churches and sitting in the pews, which they only cared about because they tithed their money, and the checks that show up in the mail to support this university would stop coming.
Yeah, and the negative would happen then. What would be what?
So you think we're going to tell the truth? No, it's exactly as God said. So your political and religious officials are defiant, obstinate in their rebellion, and they are closely associated with kidnappers, slave traders, and thieves. Every one of them desires a bribe.
Yeah, there's no out clause here, is there? There's no exception here, is there?
No, and chases after payoffs and rewards.
Right, bribes.
Right. I mean, if you're supporting Hillary Clinton in this next election, and you are unaware that she and her husband are in politics for themselves, to enrich themselves, and you are clueless about the Clinton Foundation and how it's funded and what the money is used for, shame on you. And if you're unaware that your pastor is a smaller version of the Jerry Falwell, yeah, I do this and I know I'm lying, but it's raise a lot of money doing it.
And we do good.
Oh, yeah, boy. Yeah, look at the people we're
80%, 90%.
Build these marvelous churches.
Which you're on the hook for when he leaves.
So he says, your political and religious officials, they're scumbags. They're akin to kidnappers, slave traders, and thieves. Every one of them chases after payoffs and rewards. They do not bring justice to the fatherless child. And quarreling with the congregation of the bound, the dumb, and the forsaken is not pursued by them and does not even dawn on them. Now, there's no question that Yahowah is an orphaned child. But it's an orphan child searching without sufficient resources. So it's an orphan child who's searching, wants to know the truth, wants to find their father, but just doesn't have the resources to do so. That's what a Yahowah is. And shafat is the Hebrew word for to decide, to judge.
Judgment.
Yeah, to bring justice is shafat. In fact, the Hebrew word when they talk about the judges and the book of Judges, it's shafat. It's the basis of misfat. It's somebody who can exercise good judgment based upon the evidence that is presented and render a moral, fair, and just decision.
Right.
Shafat. And so he's saying, and it's low shafat, so it's negated here, so they do not bring justice. They don't plead on behalf of. They don't adjudicate and provide the information that is necessary on behalf of that fatherless child who is orphaned and is searching without the proper resources.
Or as we were, they didn't give a damn whether you lost your soul or not.
Right. And of course the father they're talking about here, the fatherless child,
is the Father in heaven.
That is correct. Now, this next part is rib. We know from the English, if you're ribbing someone, right, you're poking fun at them. You're quarreling with them. And in the Hebrew word rib, its connotations are either wholly negative or they are positive only in the sense that you're acting in a way that is the antithesis of political correct. A ribber is a hater. In this case, though, the hate is righteous indignation. God wants us to be righteously indignant. God wants us to hate what he hates. And so he wants us to quarrel with. He wants us to choose to contend with. That's what rib means. He wants us to bring a legal argument, a rational and logical argument against showing hostility and willful opposition to everything that man says you ought not do, that man said you ought to be a multicultural and accepting. Then the Muslim and St. Cloud goes and kills a bunch of people, and you have all the do-gooders say, we're just not going to let hate define us. We're not going to let hate define us.
Yeah, don't bring him to heaven.
Yeah, boy, we're not going to let hate define us now.
No, he says harass him.
Yeah, that's what God says, quarrel with them. And the people he wants us to quarrel with? That's the congregation of the bound, the dumb, and the forsaken, the religious. We'll be back with you this evening and again next week.